For the fieldwork case study, the little boy that I've chosen is 5 years old. He is white, and he is one of my kindergartners. He is diagnosed with autism, so I don't really know on what level of the spectrum he's on, but he does receive social work services. He also has daily sensory integration activities that he does with people at the school. I know in his current IEP that's coming up, they're looking at introducing occupational therapy services. So I really wish I could be a part of that, because I think it'd be really cool to hear not only the assessments that they did to help determine what services it needs, but also just what services he's going to be receiving through occupational therapy. He is an older brother, so he's got a 3-year-old brother, but it's just the two of them and his mom. His mom is super involved in him and his disorder. So she's really proactive in his health and his success at school, and she really works hard to communicate with the teacher. His teacher is a really good teacher, in my opinion. She is organized. She is very in tune to the different accommodations that he needs. She really pays attention to what he's got going on every day, at least from how I can tell. In the classroom, I have found through my observations that he tends to be easily distracted, or kind of like stares off into space, I guess, which is part of autism, some of the signs and symptoms of that. He is really well behaved, really well mannered. He just is becoming more verbal. So his language in general is just finally starting to become something that he is using more and more. So I guess I didn't realize it, but at the beginning of the school year, he was very nonverbal. He went through the pre-K program at the school the last 2 years, and he did not talk. So now when I meet with him, it might be 1 or 2 answer. You know, I might ask him a question, it's a couple words, but he's silly. He makes jokes. He will communicate. So with words, which is really a huge progress. Having learned that he didn't speak at the beginning of the year, even last year. So his teacher just recently told me that he's gotten to the point now where he'll share things about his life with her, you know, like fun little stories from the weekend or whatever. And then he'll also advocate for things, whether he's tattling on somebody or needs to go to the bathroom or whatever. So those are huge social skills that typically do lack with people that are autistic. So it's really great to see that he's developing some of those skills, because obviously the sooner you can start to develop them, the more progress they can become. So when I asked the teacher for some of the handwriting needs that he had, she told me that he tends to write really, really lightly. And so his mom has some concerns about that, and so she's purchased some weighted pencils, and she tries to get him to use them, and he doesn't always use them. But so the goal between his mom and her were to try to get him to write more dark. And so I took that as, I guess, a goal through the interventions that I did. Pressure, writing pressure is attributed to weak grip and grasp strength, and also just hand strength. So in kids who are that have autism, having lower hand strength and grip strength is very common. So it's also very common their handwriting is really illegible. They have a hard time with being able to identify letters, being able to visually see spacing. And so something that I learned was that when kids that have autism, they have some deficits that are visual perception related, and then also just visual motor integration deficits. So that goes hand in hand with letter sequencing, spacing, being able to copy text, and just being able to form letters. And honestly, this kid's penmanship is spot on. It is very, very, very just it's very neat. It's very organized. So for a kindergartner, I think that he's right on track. And so for, again, most of my interventions, I just worked on hand strength and grasp. So one of the interventions that I did was working with Play-Doh. I think we all kind of did that. But really a lot of the ideas I had were coming from my classmates, coming from the worksheets that were provided to us from the occupational therapist in Whitehall, and then just through Pinterest. So with Play-Doh, unfortunately I don't have Play-Doh here. I left it at the school, as with many of my other intervention stuff. So this is actually some hand therapy putty. So, just making pancakes, squishing them down, rolling them, forming snakes, pulling them apart. Not so easy to do with this, apparently. Making little balls, also just pushing your finger into it. And so those are all activities, again, for strengthening. A lot of the interventions I did, I also tried to incorporate the alphabet, his name, numbers. And so one such thing is also a paper plate, which I don't have either, but this is just a piece of paper to mimic that. So you take a paper clip, or clothespin, I should say, and you identify there's letters around the outside, and so I would spell his name, and so he would find the letters, and he was smart. He knew his name, so that was awesome. Some of the kids I worked with often didn't, so it's just moving it. It's kind of a hand-eye coordination, also visual representation of seeing the letters. It's also working on the pinching. So we often worked with bubble wrap. One of the teachers, when they were getting school pictures, gave us a bunch of bubble wrap, and so that's also an activity that I did a lot to be able to, again, work on that. I did this one as a warm-up quite often, and I would often end with this particular activity. And so at the beginning of the session, we did the alphabet pre-writing, and I definitely noticed the light handwriting that they were talking about. So that also impacted the interventions that I did, not only the feedback of the teacher and the parents. And I've got to be honest with you, last week when I administered it, it was amazing how much darker his handwriting was. And I think that, obviously is partly the interventions that I did, but something that I noticed probably about a month ago was when he would write like this. And so his hand was barely holding it. And I'm not sure why it took me so long to figure this out, but he would write, and it would be way up here. And so he had the tripod grip, or grasp. His arm was way up in the air off the table. And so I told him to put his arm down, and I don't know if it's a sensory thing or just a coordination thing or strength thing. But either way, I told him to put his hand down, arm on the table, and it was immediate. His tripod was much better. The pencil fit better in his hand. And I communicated that with his teacher to be like, hey, when you see his arm up, remind him to put his arm down. And so she told me that she told his mom, and between the two of them, they had been reminding him. And they didn't have to remind him a lot because they recently had noticed without telling him that his arm was down. So in the last couple weeks or so, I also had noticed it. And on that post-assessment, his arm is right on the table. His wrist was extended a little bit. And it was really, really, really fun for me to kind of put that all together and to be able to communicate that and to share that with the parent, and then for the parent to be working on it, the teacher to be working on it. And so this little boy, I'm really excited to kind of, I'll never know, but I think he's definitely got some very positive things in his life that'll help him to be successful, and not just the handwriting, but I think academically. So on that note, I guess unofficially, the goal was to see that his handwriting become darker, and that goal was definitely progressed upon. And so that was a huge positive out of this experience.